Thanks, Larry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. And thanks, Stacy, for taking care of the slides in Andy's absence. That really does fall into other duties as assigned, doesn't it?
No trouble. Happy to help.
It's my pleasure, and thanks again for the invitation to talk about pre-medical programming in partnership with colleges and universities. Andy and I just wanted to talk about the way that some of our pre-medical programming has been set up and how integral the choice of colleges and the relationship with pre-health advisors is, which is something that we don't always emphasize. If I could have the next slide, please. And Andy says hello to everyone and thanks for your indulgence for him to be in labor and delivery tonight.
Did he give any update, Dennis?
I haven't gotten any yet, and I really don't want to bother him right now because I think he's kind of with Kristen. So he'll let me know eventually. If he lets me know before we break for the evening, then I'll let you know. Otherwise, we'll pass it along tomorrow as to where it stands. Our primary care initiatives at Penn State started with the Robert Wood Johnson Generalist Initiative Grant back in the 90s. So those of you with a long memory might remember those Generalist Initiative grants that went out at that time. And for others who were listening in this Zoom meeting, probably your parents or grandparents told you about about these grants because they're really dating themselves back into the 90s. But and I'm not going to say that I'm dating myself. I'm just going to say the initiatives are dating themselves. But so I've been working with them since the start, which has been more than a quarter of a century now. And the grants really funded a variety of initiatives, both in admissions and curriculum, to try to promote interest in primary care. The iteration at Penn State included, among other things, pre-medical outreach with 2 events, one a primary care day, which is a single day open to all comers, and it just reviewed information about primary care, information about medical school, information about admissions, and was also open to a limited number of high school students as well. The other program, the Scholars Program, was an application-only program that typically over the years has attracted 30 to 50 students per year. The primary care day trip typically attracts about 150 to 200. So the one thing that I wanted to talk about just briefly was that we had a chance to select which college and university partners we wanted to work with. From the beginning, we decided to include state-supported colleges because we knew that there was a correlation between that and students who are interested in primary care. We also chose colleges in rural underserved areas within Pennsylvania. And we thought that that might give us students who would be from underserved areas, especially rural areas, because we knew that that correlation also occurs not only with an interest in primary care, but an interest in returning to that area. And then we also looked specifically at schools who we think of at Penn State as sort of feeder schools, schools that reliably send good students year after year, many of whom are accepted into Penn State. So we kind of mixed all of this together and came up with about 40 schools. By the way, all of them were within Pennsylvania because of the nature of funding initially in the grant. Because the funding has changed along the way, we've moved outside of Pennsylvania along the way. We also included a few higher profile schools around Philadelphia, such as Haverford, Swarthmore, Bryn Mawr, that totally didn't correlate with anything in terms of primary care, but we thought it would be interesting to work with them. And it was interesting to work with them, but it turned out that that was not sustainable on both ends, and we never generated very much interest in primary care from those schools, which maybe validates some of the statistics that we've been working with as well. Can I have the next slide, please, Stacy? Thanks. So just a few comments about working with pre-med students. So the nature of this program was we specifically worked with students just from our targeted schools. And they also developed affiliations, either clinical or academic, with Penn State College of Medicine as well. We utilized the pre-health advisors as conduits to the students, so that specifically, this is a little bit counterintuitive. We have not, even over 25 years, we have not generally advertised these programs. We have not put the programs online. We have not advertised them directly to students. We are only routing the information and the promotion through the pre-health advisors of our designated affiliated schools. So that was a decision to kind of target the focus, which is not often the way programs are organized, but that's the way this one has been done. And I'll mention in a moment that there are some advantages to that. We also asked the pre-health advisors to keep in mind that we were looking for a specific subset of students, but gave them some range of choices. We wanted an interest in primary care, but we soon discovered that that needed to be a very generalized interest in primary care, because the students are still undifferentiated for the most part at that point. So we expanded that to being receptive to primary care, and brought in quite a number of students in who would write on their essay, I think I'm going to be an orthopedist. And we looked at their reasoning and thought maybe they would be interested in sports medicine. Let's bring them in, show them what sports medicine is, and see where they might go. And that turned out to be a good idea. We also focused way from the very beginning, back in the 90s, to attract students who are underrepresented in medicine, although we didn't call it that at that time. And that's always been a part of what we do. And then we looked for an underserved rural or urban location, as well as their permanent address, what they considered their permanent address, with the thought that they might return to an underserved area as well. So those subsets were preferred from the beginning. Thanks for anticipating my request to move to the next slide. Stacy, I didn't realize you were telepathic before we started working together. So just a look at the evolution of our interactions and of the program. So over recent years, the number of programs has been increasing somewhat. We've been moving to programs out of state, and just in the last 2 years, we've increased the number of programs with colleges, particularly out of state, that are typically associated with graduating underrepresented in medicine students as well in their student body. So those are new initiatives out of state, and partnering with those schools as well that are still too new to really see where those are going. The relationships with the partner schools, and I'll talk about this just in a moment when we talk about the pre-health advisors, has been strengthening and evolving over the years, maturing so that we do more things together. We set up, for example, a primary care advisory committee, which kind of emphasizes the fact that we are really not telling them what to do. This is our program and you can participate or not is definitely not the way this was set up. They participate just like we participate, and we set up an advisory committee so that they can tell us what's working and what's not working, or make suggestions for the future based on their standpoint. In recent years, we've started including an advisor meeting during the programming so that the pre-health advisors, some of whom come to the programs anyway, would have their own dedicated time to just talk with us, the organizers, about the program, and then have a chance, either in face-to-face meeting or now in COVID with virtual meetings, to share their impressions, to ask questions, and to look at how we might develop for the future. There are two other things that I wanted to mention that have evolved as well. One is stronger linkages of the program with Penn State Hershey's admissions office. And there are two ways in particular that we link with that. One is that early acceptance programs have evolved as well with two of the schools. They started out as experimental. Now they're expanding, especially just this last year. One of them is expanding, and the second one will expand next year. These are unusual programs that are primary care oriented. The students that are entering them are intended to be interested in primary care. And another way that they are unusual is that we actually look at high school students. We interview seniors in high school rather than college students who are applying to college, and they are dually accepted into their college and Penn State Hershey simultaneously before they graduate from high school. They are asked to maintain a GPA above 3.5 and get a reasonable MCAT. So there is some washout from the program, but not a lot. So these are programs that pre-health advisors see as integrated with their relationship with Penn State Hershey. The other thing is that we now have a question on the secondary application to Penn State Hershey if they did or did not participate in this program. And if they check off yes, that usually generates a review of the application at a senior level from the beginning, which we think makes the institution a little more sensitive to the students in this program, although they still have to meet criteria. The second thing we did was link with the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Penn State Hershey, which has now been in existence for several years. So we are beginning to partner with that. They are helping us expand our base with colleges that typically graduate larger numbers of underrepresented medicine students and connect us with faculty and pre-health advisors in those institutions, as well as allow us to link with students who are in some of their independent programs that are designed to increase diversity in the applicant pool for Penn State Hershey. So that's been a nice partnership as well. If I could have the next slide, please. I think the networking with pre-health advisors is part of the heart of what we're doing that might be a little bit unique. This is definitely two-way communication. This is really a partnership, and there's a lot of back and forth with it. It's nice to be able to ask the pre-health advisors to be our surrogates on campuses. They understand what primary care is. They convey that to students in group and individual settings. They offer us opportunities for increased contact with students. Earlier in the program, we made site visits to the colleges, sometimes individually and sometimes in clusters. Now it's more likely that that would be online, but we've had conversations with Penn State, for example, about their programming over the next year just to see who we might want to recommend as speakers for their pre-medical AED group. So there's a lot of give and take and work together with information and programming that I think benefits us in ways that it would otherwise be hard to get on the inside of what's going on in colleges. We also ask the pre-health advisors to select the students who participate in our programs, both in terms of advertising the program on campus and for the application-only scholars program. We ask them to select who they would like to participate, who they would recommend in the program. The students still need to fill out an application, but the pre-health advisors select students that they think would be best in participating in the program. We have a second pass through looking at the applications at Penn State Hershey, but we try very hard to accept most of the students that the pre-health advisors recommend for the program. That we think that allows them to target it to students who truly are interested, and we don't have to try to figure out from the essay or the application who's really interested, who's less likely to be interested in primary care, who is likely to be a scholastic achiever who is likely to be service-oriented, who may be considering an underserved location for practice. It would be almost impossible to sort all of this out without the assistance of the pre-health advisors, and now especially to find students who are underrepresented in medicine. It's an invaluable assistance for us. We think that it can lead to benefits for advisors as well. In our last conversation with the pre-health advisors at Penn State main campus, we found that they were really struggling to find enough shadowing experiences for their pre-health students in COVID. So we're looking to see if we can help with some telehealth options at Penn State Hershey to help them out and get their students some clinical exposure, even though it's virtual. Next slide, please. So just a quick look at the impact of programming. We have not done an exhausting study of tracking everyone down over the years, but Dave Richard, our vice chair in the Department of Family and Community Medicine for Education, did do a survey of participants in the Scholars Program between 2007 and 2019 that matriculated at Penn State, since they're much easier to track at Penn State, and looked at the percent of students who chose to match in family medicine upon graduation from Penn State Hershey. And during that time period, the alums of the Scholars Program, 30% of them chose to match in family medicine, which if we can duplicate that across larger populations, would actually help us meet the 25 by 2030 goals of the AAFP. So we think that this may have something to offer. Next slide, please. So this takes us to recommendations as I wind down, and there are really 4 recommendations that Andy and I would recommend that we or anyone consider with this program. One is establishing affiliation relationships with select schools that can help target efforts, at least if you choose this iteration of the way you would like to try working with pre-health advisors and pre-med students. The second is to integrally partner with pre-health advisors. This is probably, if anything, close to the secret sauce of what we've been doing. It helps to provide accurate information about family medicine to students, and there is a lot of misinformation out there in pre-meds about what family medicine is and what you can do in it. To gather the pre-health advisors' input in programming and in student selection, and to invite them to participate in program planning and programming as well. And then the other 2 things would be linking with the admissions office in the med school and linking with the diversity office in the med school. Just allows us to expand our scope in an integrated way and just get more punch for the effort that we're putting together. So we think these things have worked for this program and might be worthwhile considering for other programs, either as a part of wider programming or programming in and of itself. And if you'll show the last slide, we wanted to show some smiling faces here too, and to put a face on the program. This is our graduating class a couple years ago of the Primary Care Scholars. That concludes what I have to say. Again, Andy gives his hellos and regards to everyone, and I'd be happy to take any questions if there are at this time. Thank you. And thank you, Stacy, especially to you for making the slides possible.
My pleasure, and happy to help with that. I do have a question for you, Dennis, and thank you for that presentation and for that work. My question is about, you talk about like we were networking with the pre-health advisors and the program, and I'm trying to get a sense of who that is. I mean, I want to run out and meet with these pre-health advisors, but who are the folks like in the program doing that work, networking with the pre-health advisors, and how many?
So mostly over the course of time, mostly that was me. that was mostly me, working with them and establishing the relationships and moving off the ground. In the early days, the grant, the administrator of the initial grant, which lasted about 6 years, was very much involved in that. especially in the selection of the schools. Over the course of time, other faculty have participated in a variety of ways. And over the last few years, Andy Litzcannon is very much involved. In fact, he's basically in charge of the program from Penn State's Hershey standpoint now. The other way we did this, though, which I didn't mention, was there was participation across departments as well. We've worked with people from the dean's office. We worked with people from the diversity office, from general internal medicine, from pediatrics. We've worked with alums of the program who are at Hershey as students and residents. And probably the linchpin is Diane Farron, who served as a secretary / administrative aide to the program for many of the last X number of years. I'm not going to date her, but it could arguably be said that the administrative secretarial support was the most important part of it, and perhaps even more than what I did, because all the questions would land on her desk first from the pre-health advisors, and then she would screen them and package them, and then we would take that from there, even helping us to set agendas for our meetings. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but perhaps it addresses it.
And I guess, I respect the fact that this all started with a grant and that there was significant support for those first 6 years or so. But now, how is it, like, does Andy have a carve out for a certain amount of time to do this work, or is it all kind of on the side?
So it's surprisingly not very expensive. A couple of $1,000s a year will do it. I think probably the total amount, well, now in a virtual environment, it's even less, but typically $5,000 a year would cover most of the costs. It's not very expensive. All of the faculty participants who give lectures over the course of about 3.5 to 4 days for the scholars program, and about 6 to 8 hours of programming in the single day program, all of those are volunteer faculty and residents. So there's no need to pay there. We use the school facilities. Even something like a workshop with suturing is generally donated by the residency program. So we've been creative in that regard to keep the cost down. Surprisingly, the biggest cost has been food to feed them, not to actually host the program itself. Over the years, the funding has come from various places. When the grant ran out, we got money from the admissions office for a while. We've gotten money from the department for a while. It's come from various places. If truth be told, I actually contributed money myself to keep it going over a couple of years, because it wasn't that expensive, and I felt that it was important not to lose the continuity of the program. Now it's funded through the Department of Family and Community Medicine over the last few years as part of the pre-medical budget. And so that's where we get the funds. And then the other important thing is that Diane's time in managing all of this from the beginning was donated by the department. So that was a very significant piece as well.
Dennis, I really appreciated your the design principles around partnerships. I think that's part of what makes it not so expensive, which is great. If you had to identify one particular or two particular partnerships outside of your medical college, or the health system in which this is all operating, that are particularly fruitful, what would those partnerships be, and why are they so fruitful?
Oh, that's a really good question. This might be a little too granular for you, but I'm going to take a stab at it and see if it addresses what you're looking for. I can't really narrow it down to one or two very easily, because there have been so many partnerships over the years that have been valuable. I think the most productive ones have been to a number one, main campus at Penn State, because they send out 300 students a year that go into medical schools, and the primary the head of the advising system has been there for 20 years, and just a conversation with him for 5 minutes will answer almost any question I would have. So that particular relationship has been very helpful, just in connecting with a large number of students at your main campus. The connection with the admissions office has been good also. Dean Davis is very receptive to experiments and trying out new things and what our responsibilities may be. That's been good. More recently, just over the last 2 to 3 years, working with the diversity office has been really helpful because it allows us to target the expansion to pre-health advisors in schools that we otherwise would have had difficulty identifying and making contact with for underrepresented in medicine students. We have had sort of very casual and intermittent connections with the AHEC system in Pennsylvania also. And ironically, that's been partly through my connection with the AHEC system. I sit on the board of one of the regional AHECs in Pennsylvania, but also through 2 of the liberal arts college pre-health advisors, believe it or not, that we work with sit on regional AHEC boards within Pennsylvania. And that connection has been really good. And then the last thing that I would say is probably there are a few pre-health advisors that become very longitudinal, let me say, in their positions, like over 20 years, 30 years, who really know their students, really understand the program, really know how to do what we are asking them to do exceptionally well, and can make suggestions for us, can talk to other pre-health advisors, and can sort of be the mentors for other people in the program. And that's been very helpful too. So that's turned out to be another long answer to your question, and maybe a little bit more than you wanted, but
No, it was great, Dennis. I mean, you know, what I heard you say is networking with key informants in key positions as close to prospective students as possible. That's what I heard.
That's what I meant to say, except you said it in a tiny fraction of the time that I did.
No, but you said it. I mean, you said it, and those and the role that really jumps out is pre-health advisors, and it's not just about like getting to know them. There's this cultivation aspect, this developmental aspect to their own development within their job, but in relationship to you. And it really does strike me that it's similar to what we hear when we talk to other programs like the PHAP program in Jefferson Medical College, where they have cultivated for decades now tight relationships with small liberal arts colleges, particularly pre-health advisors. And they actually have the pre-health advisors, they used to at least, sit on a subcommittee of their admissions committee.
So if I can offer 2 comments, actually. So when I interviewed the folks at Pennsylvania College of Osteopathic Medicine, they described, Dennis, a very similar process where the woman who vets all of the submissions, she works with the health advisors out in the school. She goes out and she visits them. And what she said to me is, I know the kind of student our school is looking for. And I'm really good at conveying to those health advisors, here's the kind of student that we want. And that nurturing happens. There isn't even a physician involved with it. It's a staff person in the admissions office. The other thing I will say is when I was leaving Penn State, the generalist physician initiative was just about to be launched. So my getting out of there created space for that to happen.
So I'm going to interpret that, Larry, as you're saying, once again, you directly contributed to a positive development in family medicine. That's what I heard you say.
By doing absolutely nothing. Yes. So I think we've had any other questions for Dennis?
I had one, and maybe it's for anybody on the call. For these one-offs, these primary care day, you mentioned a lot of the faculty are donating time and suture equipment. Have we ever reached out to payers or local insurance companies to potentially throw money at some of these events, the one-offs?
I have not, but it seems like a good idea.
That's the kind of thing that an insurer could get behind. it's the kind of thing an employer who is really concerned about getting more primary care, I think an argument could be made. I mean, you're not talking about big bucks here. And especially if they saw you're not just trying to, get faculty time covered, except for maybe, stipends or something like that. But I think there are a number of sources actually who could be approached.
I'll share an idea that's related that we've had some success in terms of sponsorship for pipeline programs, and that is nonprofit hospitals that, as a part of their nonprofit status, have to show community health benefit. We know that a lot of that is achieved through write-offs, but there's actually some cash in play for some nonprofits. And they will be debating sometimes between, well, do we invest several $1,000s in another 5K color run? Or maybe instead we invest in supporting youth from the community who are underrepresented, who want to go into medicine. That's certainly a community health benefit if we can support them navigate that journey, and especially if they serve in medically underserved communities. So then that's a way for the nonprofits the nonprofit hospital systems to invest in a way that has a clear community health benefit.
And even managed care organizations have to expend a % of the money they take in every year on healthcare or healthcare related activities. And right now they're making all kinds of excess dollars. They're not expending on healthcare delivery what they typically do because of COVID. So they've got extra dollars and they're getting real creative. And I'm finding them to be very open to options presented to them as far as considering other ways to more indirectly impact healthcare. So yeah, I'm with you guys. I think there's money out there. It's just going after it.